fans expect.
I mean, with New and Tasty or with the
with-
DLC here?
With
In both
Alpha's
cases?
Escape.
With Alf's Escape. So Alf's Escape, it was really, yes, we wanted to make a DLC level, but in many ways, what we wanted to do was give. Matt was a designer and Brett was the lead artist at Jaw, and they had done a lot of work to pull all the existing puzzles in. You know, basically. Recreate all the existing puzzles to the game, but update them, modernize them so that they would work in this format. But they were still all the existing puzzles to the game, so they needed some creative solutions, but they weren't fresh new stuff. So by the time we got to the end of the game, which is kind of a curse of game making, I think. By the time you get to the end of the game, you actually have all the pieces to know how to really build
what it
something
is.
better. Yeah, exactly. And in this case, we were like, okay, why don't you just now you have the opportunity to take all these mechanics that work, and finally, by the time you get to the end of the game, and you have all these mechanics that work. So let's do a DLC level that's got to be bigger and better and harder than any of the levels, because it's going to be kind of a bonus level, and really take your shot at it. Take the design sensibilities that you learned that we did to get this here, and have some fun with it. Make a level you're going to be proud of, and make sure it's worth a few bucks. You got to have some meat to it. And so we agreed that it could be really hard. And but if you look at the way even now that the way that the game plays. Very seldom, and this was one of the things that was an initial target and an important part for me, was that you can look at the screen, you can take time, right, to look at the screen, but when you choose certain actions, then you got to do them, but then you get a break again. So it's constant. It's not like at times you're getting pushed into gauntlets and you got a big speed tree you got to beat, you got a countdown. Those things happen, but largely it's like sneak about, study, execute, and then do that again. Meaning we didn't want you constantly under the pressure to where you couldn't just stop and study what's going on and try and think it through, and we didn't want you to just be able to beat these games by just storming through and basically being the best Quake or Battlefield player, right? We didn't want the guy who's like, oh, I'm such a badass shooter, I'm just kicking the shit out of this game. No, we wanted to trip that guy up and still be liked, like they might not like us in the beginning, but if it's a good game, they'll forgive us for what we're doing to them. And we wanted to force them to have to think about it more, that you're not just solving it because you're real good with Twitch and you're really an expert gamer who knows how to Twitch response and beat everything, but you actually had to be clever. And in the process of figuring that out, we gave you infinite lives, but part of it was we wanted you to feel safe to experiment, and we never wanted to tell you that that's it. You suck so bad you might as well do everything over, So we had infinite lives, and a lot of people told us that it was the only game they ever got to the end of, which amazed me because it was harder than a lot of games, And in the original game, there was reasons why it was harder. It was bitmaps. When you're bringing back animations out of pulling off images and then doing cycles that way, you don't have dynamic controls, so you can't dynamically speed things up, slow things down, change the timings of everything. You're really dealing with static kinds of art. And so the game was either, when we were making the original game, it was either too easy or it was way too hard, but it was almost never in between. And really, when we released, I think we found what we thought was probably a sweet spot. But a lot of people still said it was too hard. But yet it had a higher ratio of people completing that played. Even in New and Tasty, the ratio of people actually completing the game was, I think it was over 40%, which is kind of unheard of.
Wow.
In our book. And I think that's part of the reason, it's tough, but you get to however long it takes, you can do it. You don't have to be like, shit, I didn't make it, and now I got to repeat the last half an hour or something. And Nintendo was doing that to me as a player, right? Nintendo was still, I called it coin-op thinking, which is like you get 3 tries, and then if you fail, you got to put in another quarter.
Quarter munchers,
right?
Yeah.
And I can understand, coming out of arcades where that's driven. But when I was looking at console games, I was like, wait a minute, and PC games, I was like, these are not being played in arcades. I have a much longer attention span in the living room or in the bedroom than I do when I'm at the arcade or at a retail place or at the diner. So why are those sensibilities and gameplay still being left in the legacy of designs? And that's how I felt in games where it just threw me out entirely and said, too bad, you suck. I was like, too bad, I'm not interested in playing anymore. But you know, finding that balance was really tough, particularly in the first one. I think we got a little better in this one because we did have we could tune based on having everything working and then tuning this slower, that faster, every running character, every speed. And in the original, that was really difficult for us to do, you know, because it was fixed. It was fixed number of animations per walk cycle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really proud what the guys did with this because in a lot of ways I left them alone. And then they started doing some stuff that I thought was just really evil you know, to the player or to Alf, you know, once you rescue Alf. Yep. And then what also came was Alf became, I don't know if you guys know the story of Alf, but Alf was a fan.
Really?
Yeah, and Alf was a 74-year-old fan.
Oh.
And it was a fascinating story, not to bore anyone who's heard it before, but it was fascinating to us because this guy was a World War II veteran. He was English out of World War II. He lived in the UK. And he sent us this fan mail one day. And this is after Abe's Odyssey released. And the head of our marketing came in and said, I got to read you this letter. And she read the letter, and everyone in the room was crying. And it was about like 8 pages of handwritten, you know, letter that says, you're going to think I'm crazy. And you're not going to believe me, but I swear this is all true. Your game saved my life. And let me explain to you how. And then the rest of it was this guy talking about how his life had reached this end point. He had gone through a prolonged illness with his wife, and maybe it was, I'm not sure what it was. I suspect maybe Alzheimer's, something really devastating to live with. And he said he had just been getting bitter and bitter and bitter over time to the point where he was isolated. His kids, grandkids didn't call him. There's nothing. You know, no one's really, he had no friends anymore. And so he decided he was just going to kill himself. And he still had a service revolver. And he had ammo, and he was just going to do it. And when he decided to do it, he couldn't. And he's like, why can't I do this? And he says, he in his own mind, he said, I think maybe because I've still got some money left in the bank. And, you know, I'll just go spend it, and then I'll have nothing. And so he was thinking, what's the dumbest, most thing I could spend my money on that I would never, ever do if I cared, you know? And he was at that point where he absolutely didn't care, except jumping off the cliff. So he goes and he buys a Sony PlayStation. He's a 74-year-old guy with a few hundred bucks left in the bank decides he's going to waste his money on a PlayStation. And he's looking at the games on the shelf, and he doesn't know anything about games, but he sees Abe. And he's like, I felt like that guy on the box with the Abe's Odyssey. And so he bought Abe's Odyssey. And then he went home, and the rest of the half of the letter went on to describe how he started laughing again. And he hadn't laughed in years. And he felt like this schmuck, Abe. You know, he didn't really have power, but if he was clever. And so the infinite lives, he spoke about how the infinite lives, he'd just laugh and he'd play, and he'd laugh and he'd play. And it totally brought him out of his downward spiral that, you know, where he was going to end it all. And so it was this amazing story, and we were like, wow, this is amazing. So we contacted GT Interactive, and we put him in touch with the PR department, and he got onto the BBC. They did a special on him. You know, it's kind of
that is fantastic.
You know, we were hearing about the time it was all video games and violence and, you know, all these terrible things about video games, but we were starting to get stories where people actually, it sounds silly, but they actually had these life-changing effects. And he wasn't the only one. There was a number of people. His story was just the most dramatic.
Oh, yeah.
And so now in Abe's Exodus, the game that came after this, we focused it all around Soulstorm Brew and addictions, right? Now, I came out of like a fully alcoholic family, and, you know, sure. It was, you know, I grew up in the Northeast in the cold. You know, I guess it might as well be like Russia or something, how much people drink there. But and in his letter, he's constantly taking breaks to take a brandy break, right? So he's constantly getting brandies and shit. So I was like, let's write Alf into the next game, and we'll have him addicted to the brew. And then we'll have it's all about brew, Soulstorm Brew, which is made from the tears of the Mudokons, right? So, and And then we told Alf, hey man, we're featuring you in the next game, you know. And then he was the hit of like all the grandkids. They used to have Abe parties at the house. I mean, it was really this like wonderful story. But we were like, okay, well, let's play up on Alf, and we did in the second game. And in the end, it ends with Alf's rehab and tea. You know, they're all going to rehab after they got off the brew, and it was funny. So when it came to what do we do as an independent level, you know, what do we do as a special DLC level that fit the mythos and wasn't just, you know, that actually had to do with the story. And let's put Alf. And this is the guys. This was the teams, you know. So this is Matt and Brett and a few of the other guys thinking up like, what's a good theme? They said, let's do Alf's escape. Let's do rescuing Alf, because we never saw Alf in the first game, but in the second game he's like, when I was with Abe in the desert, or when I had my first brew, you know, this guy was, you know, all giving these like AA sharing stories, you know, and that's what led to Alf's escape.
Wow. That is a heck of a backstory.
A long one too. Sorry for the long one there.
No, that's all right. That's fantastic. Yeah, we're doing fine for time. We just we're not making much progress here because, as you said,
it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. I mean, you just dove into like, you know, Dante's Inferno.